Rivers do not drink their own water. Trees do not eat their own fruit. The sun does not shine on itself, and flowers do not spread their fragrance for themselves. Living for others is a rule of nature. We are all born to help each other. No matter how difficult it is, life is good when you are happy, but much better when others are happy because of you.
Across the continent of Africa, we have seen quite a number of activities that lead to regime change from countries in the West Africa where coups have taken place, in Central Africa, in South Sudan, in Khartoum, Sudan, in Eritrea, and in Tigray and Ethiopia. Libya itself is burning. When you come to Central African Republic, it's burning. When you go to Cameroon, it's burning. When you go to Nigeria, it's sinking. Every morning you wake up, almost over 4,000 from January to March, over 3,000 Nigerians have been killed, and several kidnapped, taken by different sources that we don't know, and the forces, dark forces, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, ISIS, across the continent of Africa. The entire continent seems to have somewhere, somehow, people disappearing. What can we do to prevent this type of catastrophe happening to our countries? In Cameroon, for example, the country has been battling a war between Amazonia and the Cameroonian French-speaking country, part of the country. The Amazonians want independence. Resolution 1608 of 1961 gave them the mandate to seek a referendum. Nobody has given them that independence. African Union has never taken up the matter. It has never come to the African Union discussion again. When you come to Democratic Republic of Congo, thanks to Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and other countries that have entered Congo at the moment to pacify, to rearrange it, conflicts are everywhere. When you come to Tanzania, when you come to Somalia, across here, battles and the battles of regime change, people wanting a change, people being sponsored, people being paid to make changes. Arab states in the Gulf have moved on African continent, paid money to governments, paid money to ministers, prime ministers, presidents to create chaos on this continent. When you go south in Zimbabwe, a constant move of a threat to a regime change, people walking on the streets. In Malawi, people are walking on the streets. Is there something that is triggering this movement of regime change? The answer is yes, there is. George Soros, Open Society Foundation, and the United States of America government, which is currently the Democratic government of Democrats, they headed by Joe Biden. They always move to remove governments, not through military coups. If you are lucky in Africa, and you are not removed by a military coup when there is a democratic government in Washington, you must be like a president. What is happening to our continent? Why is the continent going this route? Why are we thinking of coming to the streets instead of resolving most of these things behind the scenes? What has come of us? Africa has been known of resolving its own difficulties without calling in regime change tactics or triggering mechanisms that can destroy our countries. There is a war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. But we are even being called upon by Ukraine to support them to fight Russia. Why Africa? Why Ukraine is not calling Asian countries to support them? Why is Ukraine not calling the other countries in the world? We are not the only continent. South American countries are very many. Why don't you call Brazil to support you? Why Africa? Why should a Ukrainian president tell African Union that I want to talk to your presidents? Are we seeing something which we don't want to speak about? I think I'll continue speaking about it until Pan-Africanism comes to this continent, until we redirect our efforts towards the rebuilding of our economies, towards the energy of infrastructure, giving the legacies of presidents who have done very well, like President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta of Kenya, who is leaving a legacy of infrastructure that is for future development, to take your goods up to the ports of export. We cannot do anything much until we realize what triggers elections, what triggers wars, what triggers violent regime change. Bad elections, bad elections, bad elections. If we arrange bad elections, if we prepare bad elections badly, George Soros will come in and give us the yellow ribbons. Bad opposition in Africa also gives triggers to a regime change. Opposition in Africa is also being used to just change governments for the sake of change. But what about the governments? The governments in Africa, some of them don't give opposition enough ground, enough stand, enough freedom of choice, association, assembly that is enshrined in their constitutions. Why don't we start working on those freedoms that will allow no foreigner to come into Africa to give us direction, to direct us, to force us to follow the axis of evil? A regime change that kills people, that leaves a country poor, like what took place in Libya, is not a regime change for Africa. I submit.
Terrorism and the increase of terrorism activities globally, and some of which have been manifested here in the continent, has been a cause of concern. So that is where we shall be basing our conversation this morning. But first, I'd like to bring us up to date with the latest news headlines from across the continent of Africa. We start with the newspapers from Kenya. Ruto goes for Moi Kenyatta over tax. That is what the Star newspaper says. President claims tax cheats are funding Azimio rallies. Opposition denies reports. You'll find that on page 4 and 5. First grade 7 class reports to junior secondary school. That is the pictorial just below that. Education CS Ezekiel Machogu with grade 7 pupils after distribution of textbooks at Nairobi Primary School yesterday. And fat moms likely to have fat kids. That is according to a survey. What is that about? Now, most Kenyan children struggling with obesity or overweight have mothers who are fat. That is according to an analysis of Kenya's demographic and health survey. It's very interesting. Okay, if you want to read more about that, you go to page 7 on the Star newspaper. The Daily Nation, junior high confusion as grade 7 learners open. That is on page 6 and 7. Ruto, tax evaders sponsoring Raila's poll protest. Allies, that story is on page 4. Not protest rallies. Sergeant's diary writer bows out. Yusuf Dawood dies in London at age 94. That story is on page 2 and 3. KPA defense tender award to Joho Family Company. You'll find that on page 14. Away with new uniform, police tell Maraga team. They also want their salaries and allowances increased to match those of other security organs, as well as the withdrawal of substandard armored personnel carriers. So our police do not want the new uniform. So someone else is gearing up to get new tenders to have. See, that's how that works. You'll find that on the back page of the Daily Nation. The Standard newspaper. Ruto goes after Uhuru. President William Ruto has gone for former President Uhuru Kenyatta's regime officials with claims that some of them are sponsoring Azimio rallies with the purpose of evading taxes. According to the president, the former regime wants to get away with waivers through the back door. The story is on page 4. Hope for bright future as grade 7s join schools. Okay, and then bosses defend high electricity cost. The power sector executives defended the latest bid to raise electricity cost, arguing it is necessary to enable the industry to continue investing in infrastructure. The proposals could also see more than 1.5 million households get higher bills. There you go. So anyway, let's look at some other newspapers from across the continent. We'll start with the New Times from Rwanda. Kagame, Congo leaders cannot make Rwanda the scapegoat. The news day from Zimbabwe. We can't disclose ED proposals. That is according to the Zimbabwe's Electoral Commission. And just beside that, ZANU-PF has already won 2023 elections. Okay. The Daily News also from Zimbabwe. ZANU-PF craves a clean landslide, and a party says it wants to do even better in 2023 than it did in 2018. Chiwenga quotes Belarus business. Chiwenga, that is the deputy president. He's a general. That is the deputy president of Zimbabwe. I guess the Belarusian president was there. He was there in Eritrea. I was telling you about it, I think, over the weekend. The Punch from Nigeria, protesting youths barricade routes, stone helicopter. How do you stone helicopter? That is after Buhari's Kano visit. Nigerians don't appreciate what they have, says Buhari, as protesters rampage. Foreign elements using Boko Haram to destabilize Nigeria. That is what the president is saying. APC campaign council kicks as PDP blames Tinubu Kadunche for attacks. The Nation also from Nigeria. Banks fail to dispense cash in holes, ATM terminals. Nigeria has just so much going on up there. I think the deadline is looming for the new notes, for the old notes to end in the circulation, I think at the end of this month. And the rollout of these new notes has been met with a lot of resistance. And I think the laws and the policies that were put around it might not be working very well. So maybe the Central Bank of Nigeria needs to relook some of these things. And now I'm just reading there, they're not dispensing from the ATM. So what is happening? All right, new vision from Uganda. Government to recruit 4,900 extension workers. The Daily Monitor, government has no power on school fees. That is according to the lawyers. Government has no power on school fees. government should have power. Okay, fine. This is the Daily Monitor from Uganda, but I'm thinking if it's government schools, public schools, the government should have powers on directing the school fees there in Uganda, and definitely here in Kenya. We need the government to have those powers, which I think it does. So, the Citizen from Tanzania: banks rake in 1.16 trillion Tanzanian shillings, net profit and record display. I think that's some good news there for the Tanzanians economy. So that is what we have on some of the regional newspapers. I'm joined from Nairobi, our in-house analyst, Mr. Wanda Wesonga. Wanda, nice to see you this morning. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Miriam in the studio.
Okay. I know we want to look at our main topic this day, but and we're looking at security, so I think we will not gear off so much of our topic this morning. So the issue of because former CJ Chief Justice Maraga, I think, was appointed to head this commission for I don't know, police reforms or something. So they're saying away with the new uniform police, tell Maraga team. They also want their salaries and allowances increased to match those of other security organs, as well as the withdrawal of substandard armored personnel carriers. And I think those demands or those reforms that our security personnel are demanding, I think, are quite legitimate, and it's about time that we really looked at the welfare of our security men and women in sector in this country. I think it's important. I don't know if the change of uniform will have a change of service. Do we have to do that? Do we have to spend so much money again, because we already spent in the new ones that they have, which I didn't like and I hate. I mean, they look, maybe because we're used to the older ones, but they're here and the country spends so much money to have them. Knowing the pressing issues that we have, should even this be featuring in our priority list right now as a country?
Not at all, Miriam. Like, this is just a piece of cloth, just a piece of fabric. It has nothing to do with the mindset of a person, the service the person is delivering or rendering to the people. Therefore, I mean, to me, going for a uniform is failing to know what should come first in the order of priorities. Because when you look at the police department, the police service, instead of talking about that piece of fabric, then they should be talking about welfare in the sense of where they're going to. I mean, their houses, the transport, so many things, quite a number of things. Then the reform in the sense of they themselves, we have what should be given to them or offered to them. Then we have that bit of they themselves. Like, I've never known, I don't know if this one happens to your end, in your end, that when I was born to the age that I am right now, I grew up seeing police, the traffic police receiving money on the road. I even thought it is part of the manual that they have to go through in Kiganjo. Today, it is still happening. And therefore, probably I want to imagine, is it a case of the salary that is not enough? Or at times, is it, when they collect the said money on the road, does this money go to some bosses somewhere, or it goes direct into their pockets? Therefore, we have so much to be dealing with in reforming the police service. Uniform should come, a uniform should be the very last thing to talk about, because it's just a piece of cloth. And we have already wasted money or spent money on the very piece of cloth. So we should use what is there instead of, again, spending money to bring in new uniform or to bring back the old uniform. It has nothing to do with the reform. When you ask me.
And I really don't like this new uniform, but that has always been my personal feeling. But, we went through that transformation and it's fine. And sort of, I see them every day. So I think I've become used to them. So that is really not a problem, because I think there are other proper reforms that They're also proposing, which I think the government should pay attention to. The police have demanded the withdrawal of fleet of armored personnel carriers, APCs, that are reportedly substandard and unable to offer sufficient protection. I think that is something that is important. They also want the new uniforms scrapped. That one can wait. And salaries and allowances increased too much, those of other security organs. I think that could be fair. And according to their submissions to the task force on police and prison reforms that is chaired by the former Chief Justice David Maraga, the officers also want the allowances pegged on their ranks as opposed to the region of deployment, and the duration of their training increased from 9 to 12 months. I think those are legitimate, reforms, points there that our police officers are seeking to have, the government address, which I think are legitimate. And go ahead.
Yeah, such a very legitimate. Like when you look into them asking at least to extend that period from 9 months to 12 months, chances are they feel like there is something that is not complete, or they normally walk out with a half-baked part of the training, which when you look at such reforms, when you look at the salary aspect, I know those are very nice reforms that probably will make them now settle down and be able to deliver the required services.
Mm-hmm. And there are some of the proposals made by the National Police Service. The task force is expected to draft recommendations for improving officers' terms and conditions of service. It is also expected to identify legal, policy, and institutional and operational constraints that hinder effective delivery of service by police and prisons officers. I think that point is very important. We have to put policies in place that, as much as our officers are out there, and we know it's not the easiest of job. It's not something that I would do myself because of the demands that I see it places on the officers who've decided to take up this as their career to serve us. And Kenyans are not the easiest people to serve, or human beings in general, worldwide. So they do a lot, and I appreciate, the work that they do. So I think it's only fair that the conditions of work and the terms of conditions and their living standards, I think, they're given. We can't say the best, but the best that the government can afford to offer, and to make sure that it's a bit fair. I think that's not too much to ask, and those are just one of the key things. But the institutional reforms is also something that has to happen. I've seen it there as one of the proposals, and you've said, when you hear about bribe, the thing that comes in mind is the Kenya Police. In the morning when I come to work, you just see them like the matatus. They know they're just ready with the money to offer this police, and nowadays they take it without even blinking. I think when President Kibaki came and we saw the wave of reforms and corruption was being fought, at that time it appeared to have disappeared, because there was even Kenyans were taking the police officers up to task. So somehow there was a bit of a change, but for a short period of time. So nowadays they don't even care. They're just receiving the bribe, and that's all they do. They don't care if that vehicle is unroadworthy. They don't care if you have your driver's license. They really don't look at the things they're supposed to look at. So it's really ending up endangering the lives of other Kenyans who are using this road. So institutional changes and reforms, I think this is something very key. I don't know how they're going to do that, but anyway, if you want to just add something before we get into our topic, you can just go ahead.
In fact, at times you look at what happens on our roads, then you look at the same department trying to do the statistics of how many accidents you've had probably in a month or in a year. Then when you listen to the reasons why we had such accidents, then you'll get cases of drunk driving. You get a case of overspeeding, careless driving. But in most cases, this vehicle that was overspeeding it wasn't just a spontaneous. It wasn't from nowhere. This car or this bus probably was overspeeding for some times before it finally got involved in in the accident. Then along the very probably highway, this bus encountered, or the driver, encountered or came across a number of traffic police. And this guy kept on probably dishing out some money. Therefore, what happens in our roads or this department, the police service department, it's not just a case of doing reforms because a number of issues have been listed. It needs a case of getting down on the ground to do an investigation, to get to understand what normally happens on these roads, probably do a benchmarking from other nations. If in case we up the salary or we provide ABC and D, are we going to realize the results that we want, or we still need to do something and at least go a notch higher? Therefore, the police department needs quite a lot to be done so that things works well. It is true that you cannot be having a police offering the service to the people, while in the evening they go and spend their nights with their families in very in shanty houses, those that are not in good shape. Or they'll go in you get to the police quarter, then you're like, these are the persons offering the services to the bosses of the nation and the citizens of the nation. Therefore, I feel like we need quite a lot to be done. It should not just go with a small list that has been provided. The department or those in charge of it, the CJ Maraga, is supposed to do a serious investigation to this, a serious research to this, so that he gets to know if I'm told we do ABC and D, are we going to realize these results, or probably we need to do something different.
All right. Thank you so much. But bottom line, these officers are very important. It can better their lives and improve on their services and motivate them to do better. We might not stop the bribing issue. I think that is very institutionalized. It's like a culture in that force. So that might take a long way for us to completely eradicate it. But if making their lives better and improving the terms and conditions of service will just motivate them to want to serve Kenyans, then I'm here for it and I support such. Okay, so now let's just get into our topic this morning, and we are going to look at the rise of terrorism across the world. According to the United Nations, the definition of terrorism, although the term is not subject to universally agreed definition, terrorism can be broadly understood as a method of coercion that utilizes or threatens to utilize violence in order to spread fear and thereby attain a political or ideological goals. Now, the attacks are targeted to different individuals, and the attack spreads fear as the violence is directed unexpectedly against innocent victims, which in turn puts pressure on third parties such as governments to change their policy or position. And contemporary terrorists utilize many forms of violence and indiscriminately target civilians, military facilities, and state officials, among others. And we've been seeing how that has been playing out in Somalia, in West African states, in North Africa, in the Middle East, in the US, and other places across the world. Now, the threat of deadly terrorism in Africa has grown from strength to strength, with the frequency of attacks rising exponentially. According to the 2022 Global Terrorism Index, 48% of all terrorism deaths worldwide occurred in sub-Saharan Africa, with 3 of the top 10 countries with the largest increases in terrorism-related deaths located in the Sahel region, in countries of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. I'm just surprised Nigeria is not up. Nigeria should be the first in that list, but hey, that is according to the Global Terrorism Index of 2022. The region also remains awash in weapons, with the proliferation of the smuggling and trafficking of small arms and light weapons further destabilizing the Sahel. So 48% of all global terrorism deaths that have happened worldwide from terrorism has been reported in sub-Saharan Africa. Forget even the Maghreb, in sub-Saharan Africa. Why do you think this is the case?
I think the case is the militarization of the civilians. In Africa, we have, the civilians have quite a number of the guns, and especially in these areas that experiences the internal conflict or conflict from within. Like you go in a country like DRC Congo, then it means it's very easy for a civilian to access a gun. You go into the Boko Haram end, then it means it's very easy for civilians to access such weapons. Therefore, terrorism becomes very easy to get in such areas. Like, number one, it is easy to access the very guns. You don't need the licensing or whatever. You can walk around the forest in Congo. Then probably you get a gun. There was a soldier that was shot. Then the gun, you'll find a gun on the ground, so you will easily pick it and go with it. Then number two, when you look into the kind of programs that we watch, some of these programs probably will train you on how to handle this gun. So one, you have easily accessed the gun. Number two, you have found a free training on watching a program that has helped you to learn how to operate the very gun. Then number three, you are living in a war-torn zones. You are living in an area where so-and-so is an enemy to our community, or so-and-so is an enemy to our group. So it becomes easy to have, to have such kind of reports in the African ends, because of the grounds that it's easy to get a gun. It's easy to get the manual on how to operate a gun. Then the conflict are already there.
Very interesting. I think you've started there by saying the militarization of civilians, and you went ahead to explain that easy access of these guns. So there has been a proliferation of arms, both small and also complicated, and we've seen that has really filled even some of these civil wars that we have in countries like South Sudan, Central Africa Republic, and these others. So why do you think there has been an easy access of these guns? Is it because we're having porous borders from other countries, or do you think is supplying with these guns? Because I think you've given an example there of maybe when a police officer is attacked and someone else snatches that guns, but they have so many. In a case of Boko Haram in Nigeria, they have very sophisticated weapons that even the security apparatus in that country do not have these weapons. So where could they be getting these weapons from?
Definitely, though, this one is an allegation that we are not so certain. We don't have tangible evidence to it. But definitely, or chances are, these weapons are coming from outside. Because when you the kind of weapons, or when you look into how we get these weapons even in our own barracks, some of these weapons, acquired from outside the countries, outside the continent. Therefore, it clearly tells you that weapons, number one, originate from outside the continent. But once they get into the war-torn zones, like if they get to, I will try to imagine, the other day we had a conflict in Tigray, that is Ethiopia, the Tigray-Ethiopia conflict. So we had guns in access. Kenya is a neighbor, Somalia is a neighbor. So in that case, it's very easy for the neighboring countries now to have access to such to the very guns. You can imagine a case of what we used to have in the Montelgon, the Matakwe era. Those guns, if Uganda had a conflict, then it was easy for the Matakwe group in Montelgon to easily access the very guns from Uganda. We normally have an issue still in that is the Maa community in Kenya, the pastoralist community in Kenya, the Turkana, the Pokot. In most cases, they will access such guns from their neighbors that are fighting, because when people are fighting, then it's weapons are in circulation. At that time, it's very easy to get this gun. You don't need to go through certain procedures that are set. Therefore, one, the origin of these weapons is outside the continent, because even our own militaries tend to buy sophisticated weapons from outside the continent. Therefore, that's where the origin comes from. But once they get into the continent, it becomes easy now, in the sense that when people are fighting, no one is so keen to look into these weapons. At times, it's only a case of bullets being shot from left, right to the center, or west to east. And at that time, people are killed. So when people are killed and people are running from one point to the other, they can easily access such guns. And when such guns are accessed, and remember, when people are fighting, economy is affected, life becomes very hard. So at that point, it's very easy if you come in and ask me, or if you come in and ask me, should kindly give me this gun, then I'll give you a bottle of water. Chances are I'll easily let go of that gun, because at that point, I'm only interested with what gets into my stomach and what I'll feed my family. Therefore, with such kind of things, guns now circulate very fast.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Before we get into looking at some of these individual countries that have experienced and intensified activities as far as terrorism in especially the sub-Saharan Africa is concerned, perhaps the general root cause of extremism that maybe drives the younger generation to want to join these extremist groups. What could be some of these root causes?
Some of the root causes is one, poor governance, two, tribalism, then the economy, with of course the external influence from it. Poor governance in this case, if the governance cannot take care of his own people, of our own people, in the sense that the government knows weapons are in circulation, but the government cannot use their military experience or expertise to know that when weapons are in circulation, that is endangering the lives of the people, and we are not living into the constitutional demand that we will protect all citizens, then in that case, poor governance has failed to take control of the weapons in circulation. Number two, when you look into that is tribalism, that tribal hatred will always make one tribe that hates the other tribe, in this case now two tribes that hates each other, to prepare for any kind of attack. Therefore, how do you prepare for any kind of attack at such an age where you can, an age where you're not going to use a catapult, an age where you're not going to use, to use a stone or to just rely on an arrow? Then it means you also go a sophisticated way. You also find a gun or learn how to make one. Then the politics. Get into the politics. Our politics is made of. Our politics is based on a nature of you fighting, or it is a tug of war. I pull, you pull. Therefore, this pulling and what a number of times has led to different ends picking conflicts. Like you can imagine what we're having in Nigeria. That is the indigenous people of Biafra, with their leader. Their leader is in cell today because of a political stand. His own people are in a conflict with the government that probably had their persons put in custody. Then, of course, the external influence. Africa has always been seen as a continent that serves the others in the sense of the minerals and the minerals or the raw materials to their industries. Therefore, how do you get what these people are having? Make them confused. Then how do you make them confused? They hate each other because of enmity. Use that enmity, equip them, let them fight each other.
Okay. And I think there's an article I was just reading on what President, no, I think in one of the headlines, and I read it yesterday in the evening, President Buhari of Nigeria saying that there are some external actors who are funding groups like Boko Haram to continue with the terrorist activities that it is carrying out in Nigeria. But it is the same President Buhari, when he was coming to power in his first term, that promised he will get rid of Boko Haram within 100 days. And then Boko Haram became a real challenge, and there are some actors in the globe, in the world, the rest of the system, that tried to come in and offer its help to Nigeria. But President Buhari said, no, we got it. My government will deal with it. So 8 years later, he's out here telling us that, because he has not been able to do that clearly. In fact, insecurity has grown in leaps and bounds since he's been president 8 years ago. And so I don't know, maybe it's just his ways of excusing his lack of effective dealing with the issue of insecurity, and he's looking for a scapegoat. But could he be having a point that there are indeed external actors that are funding the activities of Boko Haram and such other groups in Nigeria?
Yeah, it could be having a point. Like, you'll try to look at Boko Haram. If indeed the government wanted to deal with Boko Haram and completely clear this Boko Haram, then chances are they could have easily done away with it. But to have a militia group being in existence for some years, then you are unable as a government to deal with it. Chances are, for it to be, a group that your military cannot deal with it, then they could be having weapons that are either sophisticated, weapons that are more complicated than yours, or two, they could be having military intelligence that you cannot deal with it. And for them to have military intelligence that you cannot deal with it, then they're having an upper hand from either outside, but from outside, there is equally someone from inside that is liaising with them. Therefore, it could be having a point that some external forces are supporting them. Because if you're in charge of the military, the commander in force, then it simply means you're in charge of the weapons in the country. You can control them. So if you cannot control them and these guys are still having the weapons, then these weapons are coming from a source that you cannot control. So this source that you cannot control, that is supporting the Boko Haram, that is supplying the Boko Haram with the weapons, it's definitely from outside. But for them now to have the military experience better than what they have to be able to deal with them, then it means the military intelligence, someone from inside and someone from outside, they're in communication.
Okay. So when constructing or when coming up with their foreign policy, countries like the US and these Western powers, and maybe even others here in Africa, when they're crafting is the right word, when they're crafting their foreign policy on matters security, take a country like, maybe say, let's just go with the US and these other Western countries. We are divided because now, according to the report I was reading to you, according to the Global Terrorism Index, the terrorism has contributed to, sub-Saharan Africa has contributed to 48% of all terrorism deaths. So while they're crafting their foreign policy on matters security, the countries in Maghreb, and that is the west, the western part of Northern Africa and the Middle East, they're considered as the Maghreb. So they are grouped as the same countries. They're not grouped Libya, which we know has contributed so much as far as the increase of terrorism in this continent is concerned, because it is since the falling out of Libya after the Arab uprising in 2011 that we saw the increased terrorism activities from the north coming down to sub-Saharan Africa and indeed the Sahel region. So they don't really group these countries as, they don't consider them as part of Africa, and their problems are not considered as part of Africa. But how can you craft a foreign policy on security and imagine that you're going to solve it? Say you're looking to solve the problem of insecurity, or you're helping when they're sending these troops or these missions, or trying to come in and help, like we've seen even France create this G5 of the Sahel that includes these 5 countries. Of course, it has since disintegrated, and those countries included Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, and Niger. And this was established, and France was very instrumental in establishing this to help fight the extremism activities in the Sahel region. How do you craft and put up such, but leave out Libya? How do you expect this to be successful? Do these kinds of foreign policies perhaps contribute to the increased or the ineffective ways or strategies that has enabled terrorism to grow? Because if you're thinking in your head that Libya's problem belongs to the Middle East, and yet it's breaking down of Libya that has caused us some of this problem in the Sahel region, I mean, just speak on that.
It is true, Miriam. Like I was getting, the other day we were having a meeting with some quarters, that were concerned with the kind of reports based on the conflict in DRC Congo, and how such reports have fueled ethnicity in DRC Congo. According to the report, and still the reports from such groups like UN, according to the report, this is how the guy stated, and I could see sense in it. But the report does not say a police killed either civilian or killed one or whatever. They'll say a Tutsi was killed by the Hutu. So in this case, the report is fueling enmity between the Tutsis and the Hutus. And of which you look at such kind of reporting, the grouping kind of reporting, the isolating kind of reporting, such kind of reporting tend to fuel enmity, then tend to even encourage persons to end up, they end up encouraging such kind of behavior in the society. But when you look at the source of these reports, you have always said this or discussed and said that these organizations that we are having, not all of them means well for Africa as a continent. If I'm told they are talking about insecurity and say we contribute to about 48% of these, then why is it that we are still struggling to have a permanent representation in the United Security Council? If I'm told we are this insecure, then we need to have a serious representation. But if we'll be having such kind of reporting that either blackmails or either fuels, then they can only be reports that will now give a mandate to the United Nations to say we are now as a number of organizations or a number of nations authorize that this team goes at a certain place. So tomorrow, if we push out, or if Burkina Faso push out France, but such kind of report says they contribute or party to the contributions of 48% of insecurity, the terror, then France will come in a different version and still remain there. Therefore, at times I feel like this kind of reportings, they are the problems in itself. They don't offer solutions because they don't target, they don't report on, they don't report scientifically, but instead they tend to report in terms of groupings, in isolating, and at the end of the day, promoting such kind of behaviors and promoting the enmity from one group to the other group, or encouraging one group to keep on doing whatever they're doing.
Okay. So if indeed what you're saying is true, and I think it does, the ethnicity part, because we know ethnicity, balkanization is really at the root of the DRC conflict, of course, among other factors. But the M23, they're majorly Tutsis, and the FDLR, they're majorly Hutus. So how are we supposed to, or how are these reports supposed to be called? Because the reason why, allegedly, this M23 was formed is to fight the FDLR that say to have some of them participated in the Rwanda genocide, which also had the ethnic undertones, disappeared into DRC and regrouped there, and so planning to go and fight and attack the Rwandan government. And then M23 allegedly came together to fight. They had other reasons why they formed, but also part of that is to fight this majorly Hutu, FDLR rebel group that there are allegations that is being sponsored by the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, if that is who they are, so how are we supposed to report in a way that we also don't use, or when these reports are presented, we also don't help in adding fuel to an already dicey situation based on their ethnical hatred to each other, but still able to put the facts as they are for the for the media, and also for these reports that are being presented to the United Nations.
Yeah, this reporting that as an expert and as a person who wants to offer solution to a certain group, if in your reporting you realize that if I say that, for instance, if you now use Kenya, if in your reporting you realize that, yes, this group is made up of lawyers and this group is made up of Kikuyus, but if I report and say the Kikuyus have killed the lawyers, or the Kikuyus have killed the Luos, or the Luos have killed the lawyers, if you realize in such kind of reporting, you'll end up awakening those that were sleeping to join the force and promote killing now the other side, then you don't need to report in that sense. But in this case, you could be doing it the right way, but you're fueling. So in the reporting, yes.
And I think now that you've given the Kenyan example, and I think compared to this other conflict in DRC, I think there's a bit of a difference there. But I think we learned that because that is what also acted in fueling the 2007-2008 post-election violence. So after that, I think the media in this country learned. So even if towards the election season and we see that madness start in some regions in this country, the media is very careful. They will never pick on a particular community by name, so they will just say the local communities around there, but they will not directly say it is the community A that was fighting community B. So I think we learned from that, and I think we're doing well as a country, but still, haijamaliza ukabila, but it's a work in progress. But it's different from the conflict in the DRC, because it is ethnicity that almost brought Rwanda down in 1994, and that caused the genocide, because one community felt, and this is what colonization did to this continent. And the same problem that plagued Rwanda is only Rwanda went out of control and we saw the genocide played out. But it is the same problem that is plaguing even Burundi till today. Burundi is not as stable. And it has the same problem because it also has these two major communities, the Tutsis and the Hutus. So what happened when the Belgians were there during the colonial era? They favored the Tutsis more. They felt the Tutsis were more intelligent. They were more eye candy, good to look at. They were more, so they had sort of what they would consider the European feature. So they preferred them more. And so that meant if there was a position that they wanted to give an African, it would go to Tutsis. So Hutus, who were the majority, felt marginalized for a long time. So that is what colonialism did, even to Rwanda. That is what it did. So now after the colonialists left, they're like, hey, we are also Hutus and we're here and we're part of this country and we want to be heard and we want those positions and we want equality and all these things. But I think a lot of these divisions and all this, I think, stems back from the colonial era. And these are demons that we cannot exercise. I don't know. It has been difficult for us to rid ourselves from these things that were left with us, these divisions that were created, and we've just continued them and made it worse. And now our diversity, something that we're meant to celebrate and be proud of, it has become something that we use to fight, has become a weapon, which is quite unfortunate. But go ahead and conclude what you were saying there earlier.
In fact, you nailed the point so well. That what happened during the era of colonization, when they divided our people based on their tribes, then favored the minority at the expense of probably the majority, they could ensure that the majority knows what is happening. So in this case was the reporting that this minority is given a favor at the expense of the majority. Probably they're even punished or asked to go and do the tilling, to do the farming and all those kind of things in this land of the minority. But they will make sure all the others have known what has happened. So in this case, it was very easy to divide against the people. That if you do the bad things, but in so doing, you don't let the other one know what you have done, then it becomes pointless. But once you fuel the enmity and makes these people know that, yes, this one I've done this, then it becomes easy. It was the same case with what happened in Kenya, that the kind of a tribal enmity that you've been having, the Britons did the same. But in their reporting, it was not that they're the ones who had made it happen. They made it clear that people of community So are working in the lands of the other community. So this other community felt like, why should we go and work in this other in this community's piece of land? And in so doing, they picked an enmity, not knowing there is a third party that is doing this. But to them, they knew this community, we are working for them. We are being punished because of them. They're being used, they're gaining our kids. They're in schools while we are not in schools. So at the end of the day, it was the reporting that made these other people knew what was happening. Then like bushfire, every other person knew what was happening. And it's the same kind of reporting that happens in these war-torn zones in Africa, or these areas that experiences the ethnicity. Like we had ethnicity in DRC Congo, even before the 1994 genocide. But the reporting after 1994 in eastern part of DRC became so clear and got into so many people. And therefore, what we're experiencing today, the reason why the Tutsis feels like we are being targeted, we are being killed, it's simply the reporting is now very clear. The Tutsis were there in DRC Congo before 1994. They were being, the conflict was still there. They were being harassed and such kind of things. But it wasn't so clear because the reporting was not very clear to every person. But once the reporting was made out, pronounced, that the social medias are now reporting, the radios are reporting, the print medias are reporting about this, then any other Tutsi that is seated somewhere knows we are being killed. Our people are being targeted. Then at the end of the day, they get armed, they have to revenge. Then the kind of reportings that people are being killed, we are contributing to this 48%, we are having militia groups that are armed. It becomes a reality because you have told these people, this community is killing your people. Get up, you cannot have your children killed whereas you are sleeping. we have a gun outside there, go and get it, go and kill the other one. And in so doing, we get such kind of reporting, but the kind of reporting, the percentages increases because you have provided a gun and you have told this person, someone from this group is killing you. So why are you sleeping? And yesterday they killed your mother.
Okay, all right, thank you so much. So we are looking at the new wave of global terrorism in the offing, and we were just basing our conversation on the 2022 Global Terrorism Index that said 48% of all terrorism deaths worldwide have occurred in sub-Saharan Africa. And Wanda Wesonga was just trying to explain one of the key factors that this could be a contributor to increased terrorism activities in the African continent is ethnicity. So that's where we are at right now. And we are joined by Dr. David Matanga. Doctor, a very good morning. It's afternoon here, about 12 minutes, and nice that you could join us.
Thank you very much, Miriam, for holding the fort this time from your side of the planet. Thank you very much, all viewers. Thank you very much, Elvis, for doing the needy for the. Did we reach this situation where we are? Look at the type of refugees that are coming to Britain. Where do they come from? Are there Africans that are being resettled in Rwanda? Among the refugees that we have, 96.8% that Britain wants to take to Rwanda. There is black and Africans are just very few, about 3, 4, 5, 10. The rest are from Middle East, Syria. Where did these refugees come from? Now, if you talk about the increase of terrorism, where are the Talibans? These are questions that we in Africa should start asking each other. The Americans carried the Taliban from Taliban. We don't know whether they are terrorists or not. It is the Americans' word. They have told us they are good people. But for us, not natives of Africa who received these terrorists, we don't know whether they are good people or not. And they were thrown into our countries that for a short time. Can we have accountability? How many have been registered? How many have been taken to United States? How many are still remaining in Africa? Because every time Africa, we are crying, there's terrorism coming up, there's this, but we bring these problems to ourselves. Why did we accept refugees from Afghanistan who have no cultural background with us? Why don't we take the refugees from Afghanistan to Qatar? Why did America bring them here? They should have built apartments in Qatar by now and house them there. Since they have the same religion, they have the same culture, they have the same color, they have the same everything. But you are carrying refugees from Afghanistan, shipping them into Uganda. We don't know how many are left. How many are in the camp? Don't you think that some of them, Miriam, could become the real terrorists who are going to hit us? I'm just thinking aloud. Back to you in the studio, if that is one point. The second point, sorry, not back to you in the studio, because you have been talking for 1 hour. Let me also talk for another 20 minutes. One day, and there was some. Mr. Buhari promised us that after 100 days, in the first term of office, I will clear
all Boko Haram operatives, where are they today? How many has he killed? How many has he captured? How many has he rescued? If you look at that record, it goes on diminishing until Boko Haram grows. Today it is covering the whole of even some ballot, even election officials in Nigeria say this election is going to be a complex because of the insecurity as a basis of the complicity. Okay, let's come to a country where you have been talking about, where John Paul is about to touch at 3 p.m., which is 4 p.m. East African time. The plane will touch Kinshasa today. He will kiss this soil. Pope should eat the soil. Let the soil go in his mouth so that he can create peace in this country. This country has been having no peace. It has no peace. It has difficulties. We must resolve them. The Congo of the East and the Congo of the West don't see each other. But the worst part of it that worries me is 131 rebel groups that are stationed in Congo. You can call 25 of them or 30 of them in Nairobi, but there is still 100 in Congo bushes. What do we do, and what can we do to bring them to a table such that we don't have a recurrence of difficulties that we see across the DRC and the Central African Republic areas? Miriam, with those two words, I landed the mic by saying, maybe you can interrogate the Ugandan issue further. Where are they? How many of the refugees that were brought from Afghanistan are still in Uganda? Have they not melted into South Sudan towards Khartoum? Because they look for where the color is or where the religion is. Have they not melted into Mogadishu? Let's come to Mogadishu. I told you sometime that Americans are very clever people and at the same time very dangerous. You see, when you hear a rumor that someone is talking to Al-Shabaab, then you think you dismiss it. But now it is coming clear that there are deals being cut behind the scenes, which could bring about changes in Somalia. But before the deals are cut, Somalia itself has taken an initiative to wipe out the rebels. And I want to thank the terrorists, the president of Somalia, for having armed the locals to finish up the mess created by Farimajo. I land the mic.
All right. Thank you, Doc, for the points that you made there. And perhaps wonder before you come in and respond to some of the questions that Doc has raised there. There has been also an increase in terrorism activities in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo outside of the known rebel groups, which others have been designated as terrorist groups. The increase of attacks by the Allied Democratic Forces, the ADF, a Ugandan armed group based in the eastern DRC that has pledged allegiance to Daesh and wages frequent attacks in the area. And this week, I think they've carried out an attack. Last week, there was an attack. The other week, there was an attack. And it's just now that they are intensifying. They've been there for a while, but the attacks were not really there. Every now and then, they will enter Uganda, carry out an attack here and there, but it was never really targeted in the DRC. So why do you think they have changed their focus, and now they want their voice or their activities to be known, that they are also part of the insecurity in the DRC? What do you think is going on?
When the same thing that was in Ethiopia, when the Oromia were not recognized, they also pushed, and they are still trying, or at least we are still having a bit of such elements. Now, when you go into the DRC Congo, people tend to only talk about M23. But at the same time, we talk about having 131, 132 rebel groups. So if we have another rebel group, or definitely have some one or two other groups that will want to prove that they are also there. But why are you only talking about them alone? Does it mean we are this weak? Therefore, it's only probably a statement that we are also there. That you cannot just mention this other group and forget about us. So chances are they're either trying to convince themselves or to confirm if indeed they are weak or they are not weak. That it is a human thing. It is in the mindset of people that if children are in a family, then they all think they are bad, or they all think what they did is not okay. If you only quarrel with one and punish the other one, chances are tomorrow the other one will do even worse than what this other kid did, because they all did some mistake. Talk about it, talk about it, not picking one, but cut across. If you want to confront it, then talk about kid A, B, C, and D. But if you only talk about kid A, then kid B will want to prove a statement. So what is happening in this group is that one, they probably trying to prove a statement that we are not weak as you people think. Or probably they are trying to prove to themselves, does it mean we are this weak that nobody can notice us? Therefore, that's all that I can talk about it, that we have been talking about other groups, but they know they're there. Mm-hmm. So they're either trying to convince or to prove to themselves that they are not weak to be unnoticed. Mm-hmm. Or one, they want to be noticed that we are also there.
Mm-hmm. All right, and we're also part of the people who are causing this chaos. And some of the issues that Doc has raised there, would you like to respond? The issue of the migrants being brought from the UK to Rwanda, and others who were brought to Uganda after the falling all out of Afghanistan and Taliban took over.
Yeah, it comes in with what we are talking about, the nature of reporting as well. That you fuel, then you report it, or you create a reason for something to be talked about or to be there. Like one, we have the Taliban, or we have had the immigrants coming in with the history or the background that is not so clear. Then at the end of the day, we start experiencing, or we start having such kind of reporting. Therefore, with such groups being in and the reports coming in, it's the case of you have created the problem. Now you're talking about the problem. So you want to amplify the problem so that when it's being done, you have already talked about it. But at the back of everything, whoever brought in these groups knows what is happening, and probably knows why such kind of reporting has to be made, or to be out there. We have had cases of the ID cards being lost, and the other day we had a bombing in a church in DRC. Then it was perceived, or it was alleged, that a Kenyan was involved in this, only to later on the other reporting now to come in and tell us that no, it was a case of an ID that was that missed, because probably the portrait of a person on that ID was not of those persons that were on the ground, and therefore the reportings to me, it's simply a reporting to fuel what has already been planted. Because if we have these groups that are coming in with a crooked background, a background that is that can lead to such kind of acts, then we have such kind of reporting. It's simply planting, then fuel it up.
Okay. And you know, one of the key things that initially was the motivating factors for these extremism groups, the founders like Al-Qaeda and the rest, and Al-Shabaab here in East Africa, and Boko Haram in West Africa, you know, there are three key things that they use as the reason why they are waging these jihad wars, as they call them. They're fighting the West in education, they're fighting the West in democracy, and they want Islamic states in some of these countries. But lately, there seems to be a shift in what motivates them. There seems to be a shift from these three fundamental, because they're fundamentalist, these three things that really formed the basis as to why they came together to cause terror across the world. But there has been a shift lately. So what could be the reason why? And of course, there has been President, like what we were saying earlier, President Buhari said that there are some external funders who are funding Boko Haram. What could be the reason why, Doc?
First of all, Miriam, the generations of today, I was going to a lift somewhere. Then I found a young lady. I was with other people. We found a young lady in the lift. And he had the luggage. For purposes of balance, not so that we are not told, I will not tell you the nationality and the country, but from my description, you will know. Then the lift opened. Then one of us said, let's help you to carry out the luggage. He said, no, very angry. Then we said, can we keep the lift? Because if you are carrying this luggage and are putting this one out, by the time you come in, the lift should have gone where? Up. This young lady became very upset with us. So all of us left the place, the lift talking. Are these not the people who can find you and kill you? Eh? If this person you are trying to help is like in Britain, when you want to talk to a Jamaican, you stop to greet. The Jamaican will ask you, did I tell you to stop to greet me? Eh? Why are you greeting me? Anakupiga. Naanza kupiga. Twa, twa, twa. Who told you I wanted your greetings? Hey. So the behavior is actually embedded in. Then if you add on radicalization, whether Christian radicalization or Islamic and radicalization, they all remain radicalization. If you tell people you are killing because of a Bible, and then you tell others you are killing because of a Quran, the Quran does not tell you to kill people. The Bible doesn't tell you to kill people. You are an individual, that's it, period. You are killing because you have got the intentions to kill and you have got grievances that you don't want to tell us. I'm sure this lady in her mind was thinking, what are these Africans, 3 of them in a lift? Why do they want to help me? So I tell you, Miriam, the reasons of the past have shifted, narrowed to religion also. You can see some terrorists capture people and then tell them to recite some Quran verses. You know, then if you don't recite the Quran, then you are deemed not to be a person from that particular sect. So these things are happening. They're happening. I learned my mind.
Thank you, and thank you for reminding us there. It's not only the Muslim fundamentalists. We've also had the Christian fundamentalists, and we've seen a wave of that rise in Europe and the US, particularly the white supremacists or the Proud Boys who led the subversion. What we saw happen in the US a couple of years ago when President Trump, was still president. We saw a rise of Christian fundamentalists who operate the same way we see Al-Shabaab operate, and attacking other people and attacking other races. So it's not just a Muslim fundamentalist problem anymore. It has now spread to other religions. And when you go to Israel, what is happening there? The Jewish, the ultra-Orthodox Jewish, that are fundamentalists who don't believe that other people are supposed to be where they're supposed to be. So it has indeed, Doc, like you've stated the case there, taken other forms, and we're seeing other motivations. Wonder. But of course, the others, we're not calling them terrorism. I don't know why not.
And I think religion was picked as a weapon all time. Way back. When colonization was being staged in Africa, and this kind of conflict, it had to start with Muslim before finally Christian getting in. Probably we'll get to some others later. But when you look at our history, the kind of enmity between with Muslim being used, being targeted, being renamed or being blackmailed with such kind of tags, it was just meant to be to happen that way. It's only that we, the people, are the ones that took so much time, or it took us long before we finally learned it. But as Doc, and as you're putting it, Miriam, the Christian are only now being used, or now being radicalized, being used as well to plant the grenades and such things to further fuel the enmity, the conflict in the region, the insecurity in the continent, after probably the version or that narrative of using Muslims alone probably is now fading. That as a people, they have now been able to intermingle, to intermarry, then at the end of the day, it becomes useless or meaningless. So for it to keep on working, for the conflict to still be there, the insecurity, so that other things will be done in the dark or behind the curtains, then Christians are now taking a serious shape. Probably tells a reason why these other religions, especially when you look at the Hindus, and it's not so much, because when you look still into the history of the scrambling for the rest of the world, these other religions did not take an active role as compared to the Muslim and the Christian. But it's still, it's just a case of blackmailing and still using that doctrine to to serve as a tool of doing other things behind the curtains. Because if you radicalize, persons based on their faith, if you plant an idea in a person based on faith, then it tends to stick so much as compared to anything else.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey. This situation of radicalization of youth and escalation of terrorism also comes with a very heavy price of disease some of the movements are not very, very good. For example, people to stay in camps for a long time without medical care, and you have not screened them, then all of a sudden you airlift them to another place. It is not very good. But the final statement that I want to make is Africa should start sharing intelligence reports. African countries are not united media. They don't share intelligence reports to gather intelligence on what type of conduct you find in Boko Haram, for example, the pattern of Boko Haram. You know, we should start that type of discussion. I land my mic and I think I wish you good afternoon in Nairobi. Let me try to find somewhere where I can go and nap. I woke up so early. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And that is where we end our show this afternoon, about 37 minutes past noon here in Nairobi. Thank you, Dr. Matanga, and also thank you, Wanda Wesonga. I'll see you later with more news from the continent of Africa. My name is Miriam Goto. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.